Why hello my fellow apes, I hope you're well. Unless you've been living under a rock, you're likely aware of the kerfuffle revolving Richard Dawkins' recent tweets, and because of said tweets, his 1996 award of Humanist of the Year being revoked by the American Humanist Association. This has led to quite the schism among atheist activists, with, for instance, Hemant Mehta calling out atheists who are, quote, defending Richard Dawkins' anti-trans tweet. Ayaan Hirsi Ali stating that the AHA are absolutely scandalous and cowardly, and even the quiet clone of Charles Darwin, known to us as Daniel Dennett, has said his piece. Basically, things are already well out of hand. Given this, you might be thinking, Steve, what the hell are you doing? Sit this one out, my dude, especially given your own mistakes in the past. You're almost certainly going to burn down a few bridges, and no matter what you do, Ethel's going to create 100 videos spinning the narrative that you're somehow responsible. Oh look, they've already started. Alright, fair enough, not throwing my hat in the ring is good, safe, wholesome advice, but it would also be, for me at least, timorous, since I want to say something but I'm only reluctant due to past transgressions. More importantly though, I feel as if there's been a distinct and distasteful lack of nuance from both horns at the present, and it's quite frankly making our entire movement look pathetic. There's points from all sides that are not being all that well considered by the opposition, and I want to attempt to at least highlight these issues. Now, naturally, you're probably not going to entirely agree with my views, but should you disagree, depending on which direction you lean, be sure to call me an alt-right dog whistler or a member of the wokequisition. From the outset, before delving into any of the details, I think it's important to get two things on the table. The first is that despite this debate pivoting on the actions of Dawkins and the AHA, we should appreciate that the bulk of the expense isn't paid by either of these, but rather, once again, it's paid at the expense of trans people. People who have to deal day in and day out with others rejecting one of the most fundamental aspects of their being. It's also easy for me or Dawkins etc. to have a calm, logical, semantic debate on a topic that doesn't affect us, but for those that have to deal with people incessantly doubting their experience, this is surely just another kick in the teeth. Hopefully in a generation or two the vast majority will be on board, but until the ignorance subsides I unfortunately can't see these situations ceasing, as is almost always the case with social change. And the second thing to consider up front is that Dawkins is very much a product of his time, whereas the issues of today have changed and progressed in part, no less, because of his work. It's entirely possible, perhaps even very likely, that he's using outdated language. Further still, he's consistently operated with a clinical, cold, logical, tone-deaf scalpel, and that's coming from me for crying out loud. He offends people regularly and with great relish. What's more, even in his prime, he has never been especially savvy in any other field other than evolutionary biology. These facts are by no means an excuse, of course, but we do have to consider them, especially since many are accusing him of malice. Alright, with those two things said, let's start with Dawkins' tweet on the 10th of April. Here it is in full. In 2015, Rachel Dolezal, a white chapter president of NAACP, was vilified for identifying as black. Some men choose to identify as women, and some women choose to identify as men. You will be vilified if you deny that they literally are what they identify as. Discuss. Now there seems to be a fairly large audience that doesn't see anything wrong with this tweet at all, but consider for a moment Meta's response, which came 2 days later. In 2015, Dolezal became the subject of a controversy when it became public knowledge that her parents were both white. That alone wouldn't be an issue, except that, until that point, she had flat out lied in public about having a black parent. She passed herself off, on paper, as black. She wasn't simply vilified for identifying as black, whatever that means, so much as lying about it to gain some kind of edge in her professional career. Trans people, on the other hand, aren't changing genders just for the hell of it. They sure aren't doing it because it gives them some kind of advantage in society. More to the point, they don't choose to identify as the other gender as if it's some kind of light switch. They are the other gender. If they undergo surgery or take hormones or request a change in their driver's license, it's to correct a mistake, not because they want to be another gender on a whim. So back to Dawkins. He's comparing a liar, whose lie he passed off as genuine, to trans people, whose truths he dismisses. He's comparing race to gender, as if they're the same thing, in a way that allows bigots, including right-wing Christians, to use his words as weapons against trans people. Now, I don't agree with the entirety of Meta's language here, but I do accept the core criticism, which is perhaps more succinctly put in the following response. If Richard Dawkins, at risk to nobody, had said that he thought Bigfoot was real, everyone in skepticism would happily put him out on his ear. But he questions the validity of millions of actual people while laws are being passed to take away their rights, and it's time to play nice. Again, this, in my opinion, seems like a very fair criticism, cutting swiftly at the jugular. Many people, perhaps even most, don't accept the distinction between sex and gender, and they don't seem all that interested in having their minds changed. Rather than recognising the science of sexual dysphoria, the fact that one's biology and psychology can be in conflict, and then seriously considering that perhaps, maybe, trans people are correct when they state that it's their body that needs altering and not their mind, many see transgenderism as just some woke ideology, in much the same way that many Jews, Christians and Muslims see the rights of homosexuals. But getting back to Meta's post, there is one sentence I especially take issue with, and it's within the first paragraph. On Saturday, for some reason, Richard Dawkins randomly decided to question the humanity of transgender people, under the guise of "I'm just asking questions." I wonder, how does Meta know that it's a guise rather than an honest but insensitive question? The word guise implies that Dawkins is concealing the true nature of something, that he's deliberately trying to undermine a marginalised community with the facade, the face, the guise of "I'm just asking questions." Now, don't get me wrong, I can understand why one might suspect that Dawkins is doing this, especially given some of his previous tweets, and I can also appreciate that Meta might be using an alternative definition of guise, but without clarifying as much, and without sufficient evidence, I find this accusation here both illogical and uncharitable. Meta is a lovely guy, and he's really switched on to these kind of things, and so perhaps he knows something that I don't, but I have to say, I think he's seriously dropped the ball here. As already said, Dawkins' modus operandi is clinical and cold, and even when he's just thinking out loud, he speaks with confidence and passion. But when someone confronts him with a logical response to a position that he's otherwise confidently stated many times on stage, he has, on the spot no less, changed his mind. Consider the following example from Alex O'Connor's podcast, in which O'Connor challenges Dawkins on his statement of studying theology for any other purpose than anthropology, literature, and history.
Well, I mean, the reason I ask is outside of the anthropological investigations, the kind that you were just dismissing as useless. If an atheist engages with that kind of thing and studies theology in that manner, do you not think that it can be useful in the sense that understanding those controversies can help people to debunk?
Good point. Yes, probably can.
And I mean, the way that you talk about theology might put someone off trying to do that.
Yeah, could be. Yes. That's a fair point.
So on the one hand, I'm convinced that one could change Dawkins' mind, or at least get him to realise the issue with his tweet, with just a tiny bit of earnest compassion and time. But on the other hand, and as many have pointed out, this isn't the first time that he's tripped this wire. If some are done with Dawkins because of his lack of sensitivity, then I totally get it, but as someone who knows all too well that it's easy to fail to recognise the weight of a subject when you're being strictly academic, I just don't see how people can assume his intent as one of malice. 1 week later, on the 19th of April, the AHA made the bold move of rescinding the reward they gave Dawkins in 1996. Here's their statement. Established in 1953, the Humanist of the Year award is conferred annually by the American Humanist Association, AHA, recognizing the awardee as an exemplar of humanist values. Communication of scientific concepts to the public is an important aspect of advancing the cause of humanism. Richard Dawkins was honoured in 1996 by the AHA as Humanist of the Year for his significant contributions in this area. Right, so in 1996, according to the AHA, Dawkins stood as an exemplar of humanist values, and hence they gave him their award. So far, so good. They continue. Regrettably, Richard Dawkins has over the past several years accumulated a history of making statements that use the guise of scientific discourse to demean marginalised groups. And there's that word again, guise. To say that Dawkins' statements demean marginalised groups is one thing, and I think it's accurate. But to say that he's doing it under the guise of scientific discourse is something else entirely, since it suggests that he's deliberately concealing his true motive, which, according to the AHA, is to demean marginalised groups. And just to dot the I's and cross the T's, if the AHA isn't using the word guise in this sense, then their statement, their justification for rescinding his reward, is significantly weakened. They continue. His latest statement implies that the identities of transgender individuals are fraudulent, while also simultaneously attacking black identity as one that can be assumed when convenient. Now, I think it's correct to say that Dawkins' statement implies that the identity of transgender individuals are fraudulent, and the reason for this is because he used the comparison of something that society deems immutable, race. But to say that he attacked black identity as one that can be assumed when convenient would mean, to the contrary, that he wasn't implying that the identity of transgender individuals are fraudulent, since, in this case, he would be using the malleability of gender as an argument for the malleability of race. Honestly, I don't see how one can confidently state that he was doing the latter, but I'll tell you one thing for sure. To say that he was doing both is absolutely the most uncharitable interpretation possible. They continue. His subsequent attempts at clarification are inadequate and convey neither sensitivity nor sincerity. I think that the AHA is correct to criticise Dawkins' clarification as inadequate and insensitive, but again, to call it insincere necessitates knowledge of his intent, and they haven't provided anywhere near sufficient evidence for this. Consequently, the AHA board has concluded that Richard Dawkins is no longer deserving of being honoured by the AHA, and has voted to withdraw, effective immediately, the 1996 Humanist of the Year award. Okay, so for an organisation to rescind a reward it gave a quarter of a century ago for words expressed in recent years, they have to have a damn good reason, especially if 1. They are an organisation who fights against religious intolerance and sectarianism, and 2. They haven't withdrawn rewards from such people as Margaret Sanger, a proponent of eugenics, and Alice Walker, a proponent of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But honestly, even if Dawkins was as heinous as the AHA has made out, I would still find their withdrawal both unmerited and, more importantly, counterproductive to humanism. If you want to talk about right-wing fodder, then just turn on your TVs, because it ain't Dawkins' tweet that's getting the headlines, it's the AHA burning a heretic. Another thing to be said is that now that the AHA has revealed that the rescinder award from last century, according to their own interpretation of a poorly written tweet, all of their rewards are no longer rewards at all. They're mere carrots on sticks to be removed the moment the horse steps out of line. Every winner is now only a winner in so much as they parrot the ever-changing views of the organisation. They've won a golden leash and nothing more. On the same day, Meta published a second article. Within, he endorses the AHA's act of rescinding Dawkins' reward, but he doesn't explicitly endorse their claim that Dawkins was attacking black identity as one that can be assumed when convenient. And I highlight this because it's important not to equate Meta with the AHA. Later in the article, he references a separate denunciation from Alison Gill, who is the Vice President for Legal and Policy at American Atheists. We need science communicators like Richard Dawkins to put in the time to learn this information and then communicate it clearly and accurately to the public, not reinforcing dangerous and harmful narratives put forward by the opponents of equality. You know, I can't fault what she's saying here. It's a strong and respectful statement that highlights the problem of treating a very serious topic as merely an academic consideration, on Twitter no less, all whilst laws that hurt trans people are being pushed and passed. Moving on, within the days to follow, many prominent atheist activists weighed in on the controversy, with most of which voicing criticism at the AHA. In response, Meta published an article titled, "Here's How Well-Known Atheist Activists Are Defending Richard Dawkins' Anti-Trans Tweet." But here's the thing, most of them are not really defending Dawkins' tweet, but rather are taking issue with the AHA's act of rescinding Dawkins' award, just as I have here. Many of them absolutely recognise the problematic nature of Dawkins' tweet, but they also find the AHA's decision counterproductive. With very few exceptions, they're attacking the AHA as opposed to defending Dawkins' tweet. Consider, for instance, the statement composed by Steven Pinker and Rebecca Goldstein, who are both prior winners of the Humanist of the Year award. As former Humanists of the Year, donors to the organisation, and prominent public supporters of humanism, we write to protest the decision to revoke Richard Dawkins' Humanist of the Year award because of tweets which raised questions about racial and transgender identity. Dawkins did not call for discrimination against or marginalisation of any individual or group, and he certainly denied any intention to disparage anyone or to lend support to transphobic or racial political movements. Now, it would still be completely appropriate for those of you who object to the substance of his tweets to criticise them in the Humanist or other forums, explaining the nature of their objections. But to seek to punish, dishonour or humiliate a writer rather than engage with his words is a betrayal of humanism. The Humanist Manifesto declares that the life stance of humanism is guided by reason. Since no one is infallible, reason requires that a diverse range of ideas be expressed and debated openly, including ones that some people find unfamiliar or uncomfortable. To demonize a writer rather than address the writer's arguments is a confession that one has no rational response to them. This illiberal response is all the more damaging to an organisation that claims to repudiate the repressive practices of religion. It has not been lost on commentators that an association of free thinkers has deemed certain thoughts unthinkable, nor that it is enforcing dogmas and catechisms by excommunicating a heretic. The AHA is turning itself into a laughingstock. Now, whether or not you take issue with Pinker and Goldstein's letter, surely everyone can recognise that it contains many points of merit. The most damning statement within their letter, because it's true, is when they say that to demonise a writer rather than address the writer's arguments is a confession that one has no rational response to them. What's really, really sad here is that there are rational responses, and this was a fantastic opportunity to express them. To wrap up, look, I totally get why the AHA wanted to make a statement, but I think that's all they needed to do. Publish a statement, like Alison Gill with American Atheists. Such an act does indeed send a clear message. Better yet, educate Dawkins, show him the evidence, show him the logic, show him the science. Be humanist. But by rescinding Dawkins' award, and especially via the most uncharitable interpretation possible, the AHA has given the opposition to humanism fodder that can only come from self-destruction.